Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast here. We are a couple days away from the start of the divisional round in the NFL, so we're going to start previewing some of these matchups like I mentioned before. Saturday games today and the Sunday games tomorrow to conclude the weekdays, but starting off with what arguably could be one of the best matchups I would say in this round of the playoffs, right? Because you got the Lions getting their first action of this year's playoffs after earning the number one seed, earning a week off as well after they defeated the Minnesota Vikings in a very lopsided victory. Not only winning the game and winning the division and things like that, but pretty much showing everybody that they're truly the best team in the NFC. There was some doubts, with some people, I guess like myself, siding with Minnesota, but that game really proved and showed you everything you needed to see, right? From an ability, from a just execution standpoint, the Lions clearly showed that they're on a different level. So, this upcoming Saturday, they will host the only lower seed to win this past weekend in the Washington Commanders, right? Every other number or higher seed in the wild card round won, except the Washington Commanders. They were the only one to upset technically in the wild card round, winning 23-20 over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They surprised a lot of people, like I said, right? The Buccaneers look like the logical choice to pick, right? Playing at home, Baker Mayfield, the experience from last year as well. I'm sure pushed a lot of people in that direction, but for whatever reason, or not for whatever reason, but really for Jayden Daniels, I just felt like that gave them a good enough chance, and they ended up winning. So they got the win last week, and their superstar quarterback, Jayden Daniels, like I mentioned, had his fingerprints really all over this game. He was a threat running the ball. I believe he was their leading rusher in this game, and he was extremely accurate, which he continues to prove and show week in and week out, right? Because the running does make him extremely unique, right? It's only really him and Lamar that kind of have that build, that very slippery, just very agile and hard to even come close to kind of build that quarterback. And I would say at this point that Jayden is a little bit more accurate and a little bit more decisive with his throws. So that's what makes him overly dangerous, obviously, and what allows him to elevate the rest of his team to victories like we saw in the wild card round, right? That's what they brought Jayden Daniels in for, right? That's what they envisioned with him, and already you're starting to see the benefits of that. So that's what happened last week, and now off of that victory, the Commanders enter this game now on a 5-game win streak with a 12-5 record to finish the regular season. They're technically 13-5. And that reminds me of something that I saw today. If Jayden Daniels gets another win, he would equal Ben Roethlisberger for the most wins in their rookie season with 14. So, I mean, he's close to doing it. It's going to be extremely hard, but, he's already in that category, historically speaking about things. So I thought that was pretty interesting to kind of put it in perspective. And also, him and the rest of this offense, really to their credit, because they do have some pretty decent players, like Terry McLaurin's obviously exceptional. But as a group, I definitely feel they can get better, but they have played well enough to be the 5th scoring highest offense per game in the NFL. They've scored 28 points per game entering into this contest, and the Lions aren't too far off. They're actually number 1 in the NFL in terms of scoring. They've entered with about 32.2, I believe, points per game going into this game, and they got a 15-2 record. Obviously, they enter on a 3-game winning streak leading up into this game. And what's funny about their 2 losses is that both of them have come at home. They lost at home to the Buccaneers, and they lost at home to the Buffalo Bills. And obviously, you look at the Bucks, the Commanders just beat the Bucks. So is that something to write into? Maybe not, just because it was so early in the season, but it is interesting to point that out. And also, they've only lost one time to an NFC opponent all year, right? Outside of Tampa Bay, no one's really been able to get one up on the Detroit Lions. They're undefeated in their division, and against every other conference opponent, that nobody else has really been able to keep up with them other than the Buccaneers, right? So that's also something to watch out for in this game. Funny for the Lions, too. They're undefeated on the road, but again, both of their losses have been at home. So that is a bit peculiar as well. But the most interesting thing about this, too, to watch in this game, based on how everything goes and turns out and whether or not the Commanders can kind of keep up and stay in this game, a large part of that is going to be regarding fourth downs. And I think we got two of the head coaches that are really the least scared about going for it on fourth down, right? We're talking about Dan Campbell, who has built that reputation of going for it a lot on fourth downs, and Dan Quinn and the Commanders aren't really too far off of that as well. It's showing all the confidence that Dan Quinn has in his rookie quarterback already. So they're two of the coaches that I would say are probably the two coaches that are least afraid of the consequences of not gaining a fourth down. They're not really worried about that too much. And throughout the year, Detroit ranks fourth in fourth down attempts. They're at 33 attempts on the year, converting at a 67% conversion rate, which is seventh in the NFL. They're 22 of 33. If you convert that percentage, obviously, that's good enough for seventh in the NFL, which was a little surprising. I thought they were higher up. That's just me. That's what I thought. But it's also interesting with the Commanders because while I thought the Lions were going to be higher up, the Commanders actually rank 18th in attempts, so a lot lower than the Lions. They've gone for it 23 times, but they have the highest conversion rate in the NFL. They're converting fourth downs at an 87% rate so far through the year. That's first in the NFL, like I've mentioned. They've gone for it 23 times, and they've only failed 3 times. So that is an extremely high rate, and I'm almost positive that's only during the regular season, not taking into account the wild card round. So that's still an impressive, number because they don't go for it as much as the Lions, but the times they do go for it, they're almost always getting it. And it's going to be interesting, and we'll see how, one decision to go for it on fourth down, maybe by the Lions, affects the Commanders and vice versa, right? Who's going to kind of cave in first and get a little bit of cold feet, I would say, right? Because you want to go for it, right? And you have the opposing head coach also going for it. So you guys are kind of having like a individual battle, and I'll be very fascinated to see kind of how far they stretch it out, right? Maybe like a 4th and 3, 4th and 4, someone goes for it on a 4th and 5. It'll be cool to see how kind of far they push that limit. But that's going to be a huge deciding point in it as well, right? Keeping your offense out there, the momentum and everything like that. That'll certainly be something to watch out for. And in terms of injuries, the biggest piece of injury news for the Lions is that they're going to have David Montgomery back. And I don't mean for that to sound like lightly or anything like that. That's a huge portion of their offense because they were already looking great with just Jahmyr Gibbs. But when you have David Montgomery come back in there, it really makes it very, very tough for anybody to just really stop them or contain them all game because you got to deal with 2 guys back there, obviously. So he recorded a full participation this week in practice, so he's expected to be out there. And last week, or not last week, but 2 weeks ago for the Lions, they got a little bit of a scare with their rookie cornerback, Terrion Arnold, with a foot injury, but he's also been a full participant, so he should also be out there as well. But the only really injury to kind of keep an eye on is Kevin Zeitler, their offensive guard, who is dealing with a hamstring injury, and he still has not practiced going into this game. So we'll definitely know a lot more tomorrow about what his status is going into the game. But for the Commanders, it's just really Bobby Wagner. He's dealing with an ankle injury that has kept him out of practice, but if I'm not mistaken, he really didn't practice too much going into the wild card either. So it just might be one of those things that they just kind of hold him off of. Because, if we're being honest, Bobby Wagner doesn't really need to practice per se too much. And they could just have him out there during the games, and I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up doing that. But again, we'll know about more of that tomorrow. And that brings me now to the keys of the game for each of these teams. For the Lions, just don't let Jayden Daniels beat you. Don't let him convert first downs. Don't let him run for like 50, 60 yards on you. Really get after him, right? Once we saw kind of how they approached Sam Darnold in that high-powered offense, they got in Sam Darnold's face a lot. They brought a lot of extra bodies, and they made him really try to beat them, and they flustered him, quite honestly. So I don't think they're really going to rattle Jayden Daniels, but just getting a lot of people around him, making sure he doesn't break containment or just rush it up the middle for like 15, 17 yards, and gain first downs. I think that's going to be huge for them, and I expect them to play a lot of man coverage because I'm sure they favor their matchups over who the Commanders have on offense. And with that note, for the Commanders, the main key for them is the red zone defense because, quite honestly, I don't think they're really going to put up much of a fight against Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Like, they'll try and keep it close, but I think at some point they're going to break off some big runs and they're going to get into the red zone. But once you get into that situation, really tighten up because the run game is obviously huge for the Lions. And for the Lions, to have that aspect of their offense be so good in the red zone is a huge weapon to use. But if you're able to tighten up in the red zone and really limit them to just field goals rather than just always scoring touchdowns, that's how the Buccaneers beat them, I believe, in week 4 or something like that. So that's exactly how the Buccaneers beat them, right? The Lions just had a very tough day in the red zone. So the Commanders just got to try and take the same approach, right? Because this is one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL. They're actually third to last. So again, doesn't really give me much hope of them stopping them. But in the red zone, with everything much more condensed, and if you run zone coverage very well in the red zone, you force Jared Goff to be very, very accurate. And he is very accurate, but doing that throughout the duration of the game to be almost perfect is a bit tougher than just running it and scoring touchdowns. So for me, that's what the Commanders got to do. And along those lines, it brings me to the matchups for this game. For the first one I'm looking at exactly what I just mentioned, right? Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery back together again, going up against that Washington defensive line that, again, ranks third worst in the NFL. You'll probably be able to tell from the first drives how this is going to go. If the Lions are just dog-walking them up the field in the first drive to send a message, it's going to make me really nervous about the Commanders. So it's going to be huge also to kind of set the tone during the first drive. Another matchup I'm looking at is Cliff Kingsbury and calling his offense going up against Aaron Glenn, right? Two guys that could be head coaches next year. This is a great opportunity to put tape out there, right? How are you in these big game situations, calling and executing game plans and things like that? A lot of potential suitors are looking at that. So seeing these two guys go head-to-head and how well Aaron Glenn performed against the Vikings, we'll see if he's able to do that again against another high-scoring offense. So that'll be interesting to see that sort of chess match between the two coordinators. And the last one for me is guys like Dyami Brown, Zacchaeus, Zach Ertz, I guess I could throw in there as well. Those kind of guys, the secondary options for Jayden Daniels and the Commanders going up against the Lions secondary, because it's obvious that Terry's going to have to help out in this game, and he's going to have to contribute, obviously, but it's also going to be about those secondary guys, right? Dyami Brown had his best game, I think, of the entire season last week, and that was huge for them to get the win. So I feel like somebody else is going to have to step up. It could be Dyami Brown again, or it could be Zacchaeus, or Zach Ertz having a great game. So I think one or multiple of those guys are going to need to come through for the Commanders and Jayden Daniels. But we get to the part of the preview where we give our predictions, and I'm going to go with the Lions because unless they play like really sloppy and they show a lot of rust just from not playing, then it could be pretty close. But I just feel like it would be very uncharacteristic of the Lions and Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn to have so many things go wrong and just for them to really shoot themselves in the foot and really lose this game as much as the Commanders would have to win this game. And I just don't expect that from a team like the Lions, who have been so efficient and just so pretty straightforward with what they want to do, run the ball, play action, things like that. They're a well-oiled machine. So I just don't see the Lions kind of just getting in their own way. And it's just a lot to ask of Jayden. It's one thing going into Tampa and beating the Bucs, but it's a whole another thing like upsetting the number one seed in their stadium. And I just think the guys around him, he might play great, but it's ultimately, a collective effort. And I just feel like everybody else is going to be just a step or two short. So I'm going to go with the Lions, and they're going to move on to the NFC Championship game after they defeat the Commanders. But I hope it's still a great game. That's really my main goal from these matchups. So we're not through these previews just yet because we have to talk about the first game of the divisional round coming up. After the break, we're going to preview the Texans and the Chiefs game, one of the three rematches that we have coming up this weekend in the divisional round. CJ Stroud is going to battle Patrick Mahomes yet again. We're going to do the exact same thing this time around the Texans and the Chiefs. So we'll be right back with that.
Look